Welcome to the Lunch and Learn Live. This would be our, I think, fifth or sixth episode. So I'm just going to stop keeping count because I'm not going to remember. So I'm pretty excited to have with me. Here she is. Hannah, can you hear me okay?
I can. Sorry, I'm
Awesome.
adjusting my setup here.
That's okay. No worries. I know we were both talking yesterday about the setup and how this was going to work, but we got a pretty good.
Right.
So, Hannah is the runner-up in season 11 of The Biggest Loser, and that was almost 10 years ago. Did you realize that?
So I think it'll be what is it, 8? No, 9 years at the end of May.
That's pretty crazy.
So
It feels like yesterday. Just
it
that
does.
was
It does.
that was like our favorite season, and I've always sort of. And there's funny stories that we can tell about you and I. But it was a great season, and there was also someone from Valparaiso, Indiana, where we lived, and I think that was one of the reasons that we really ended up watching. And so I've always followed your social media, and I know all the fun stuff you're kind of doing now. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about, but I want to start at the beginning.
Okay.
And I think one of the really interesting parts about your story is the fact that you were an athlete in high school and homecoming queen and all these great things. And then you had an accident happen when you were 20. Were you a volleyball player? Talk to me about high school and sports.
Well, first of all, can I say you dressed up for me today? I really appreciate that.
I did. I do this every day, though. So.
Oh, you dress up? You wear a bow tie every day?
Almost every day, yes.
Okay. Okie dokie.
There you go.
So, first of all, let me say my father was a basketball player in college. He was like an All-American. He was going to go to the NBA, but decided to go in the ministry. So I kind of have sports is kind of a big thing in my family.
Okay.
So I played volleyball and basketball. Honestly, was probably better at basketball, but was able to get a better college deal for volleyball.
Okay.
So I played volleyball collegiately and then had an accident, fell down a flight of stairs. Actually, funny story, short story. A lot of the athletes worked at Chick-fil-A in the summertime because they gave us scholarship money. Okay. And it was at a Chick-fil-A that I fell down the stairs. So I slipped down a greasy flight in like a college, like a college town. There was a bunch of us that played sports and were on. So yeah, and basically ended what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life because I had a trajectory of going on to play after college and was thinking about moving colleges and all kind of things. But honestly, kind of what happened is sports was very much my identity. I had one of those, and I hate to say to be braggy, but I did. I had one of those dream high school experiences, was friends with everyone, was friends with like the people that weren't so popular, I just kind of never associated myself in a certain group. And I think that's what made me well liked, I guess, because it's just kind of, I was in the choir, I was in sports, I was kind of a very well-rounded kid, I guess. And so, so I was, I did the homecoming queen and all that kind of stuff. And then I went off to college and literally I was 19, I was almost 20 and I had the accident and like everything just kind of came crashing down. And to be honest, I didn't respect my body enough to be like, you know what? It's yes, your sports career is over. I was just devastated. Like it was pretty tough.
Yeah, that's and so were you still going to college at that time, or was this serious enough that you were like done off your feet?
No, I was still, so I was in college. Olivia was actually a senior, so we were at the same school at the time. And obviously I ended up having an emergency surgery, which looking back, I wish I would have never had, but I did. I was I went to University of Alabama. So, I'm at like big school, small town, right?
Yep.
So like you had to go over the railroad tracks to get to the hospital. So, I had a great neurosurgeon, but it was very fast. I went to the doctor on Monday, had surgery on Tuesday morning. My parents had to drive me home to their house in like a bumpy Suburban. And I'm like having spinal surgery. I took a semester and a half off and then they let me, enter back into school. But my life was never the same after that.
Okay. And
hate to blame Chick-fil-A, but
my wife and I blame Chick-fil-A for a lot, so it's okay. Because every time we drive past there, we feel like we have to go.
And I will say, even though I'm not the biggest fan. The food is fresh. I mean, I used to work there, so.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we're talking about going on The Biggest Loser, and you're blaming Chick-fil-A
I know.
for falling down a flight of stairs, not what you
Hmm.
would think people would blame Chick-fil-A for.
No,
It's
no.
amazing. So, what was sort of the events after that? And I'm sure that was a ridiculously hard time in your life.
So it was a really hard time. I went from never really having to worry about my weight. Like I went through a stage when I was a kid, I guess, where I was a little bigger than other kids. I don't know if you would call that bigger. Um, I was, I mean, just to be honest, I was more developed than other girls earlier. I was really tall. I was taller than all the boys until high school. So that kind of pushed my athletic performance because I was taller. I was, stronger, that kind of thing. So I went from and honestly, the transition from high school to college for me was tough too, because in high school I was like at the top. Then you
Yep.
enter college and you're like this, you're not the top
Everybody's like
athlete.
that. Yeah.
All the athletes in college are better than you. They're all good, which is so interesting. And so I got a little bit deflated head when I got to college for sure. But after that, I think the hardest part was it was my dad and I's dream together for me to go. And he never, and I'm not going to cry about this, but he never acted disappointed in me. But for both of us, we had both worked. I mean, he was at every game. He videoed everything. We turned stuff into colleges. Like we just did everything for it. And he worked really hard on that too. And so it was one of those things where we knew at that point, I mean, who knows if I would have went on? We don't know. I mean, I wasn't the number one star on the team. I was young. I was a freshman. But I felt like at that time, I'm like, what else do I have to offer? Like, what else, if I'm
Yep.
not Hannah, the athlete or whatever, how am I going to make money? Like, how am I going to finish college? Now I'm going to have to pay, And so it was a
Yep.
tough time as a 19-year-old to kind of go through all that. And I really just wanted to sleep. I remember being in bed at home at my parents' house in my hometown, which at that point was Mobile, Alabama, and just wanting to hide from everyone.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, I gained about that first year, I gained almost 100 pounds, which
Wow.
not being overweight to going, I went from being uber active. And I think this happens to athletes, maybe not as extreme as mine, but when you have a person that's been in athletics, it happened to my dad, he was in athletics his whole life. And then that stops,
What do you
and you
do?
also realize maybe I was overtraining, maybe I was over extra. I mean, all of that kind of stops.
Yep.
And so I can remember Olivia came home for Thanksgiving and I had been home for 2 or 3 months. And she was just kind of like looking at me like, I don't reckon. And she looked at me and was like, oh my gosh, like, you look like
You,
me.
you
I
can't
think it's what
say
she said. You look
anything,
like
but you
me.
can. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then I went into hiding. Like I went into, major hiding at that point. I didn't want anyone in high school to see me because, oh my God,
Yeah.
which looking back, I'm like, man, how trivial, when you need your support the most and you're hiding because of the way you look.
Yep.
It's a really sad, and it happens to adults. I mean, I heard so many stories being on the show of people going through the same kind of thing. And so going back to school and facing, it was really tough.
Yeah, and I think it could be anything. I mean, weight
Yes,
gain, divorce, any
absolutely.
type of change that you're afraid to get
Hmm.
out there and tell people that
Right.
I don't have it all together. So, wow.
Absolutely.
And then were you going back to school after that? Like, did you
Hmm.
go back to Alabama?
So I went back to school. I went back to school and I finished. It took me a little bit longer because I had taken those 2 semesters off. I think it was 2 semesters, maybe it was a semester. So I was a 5th year senior.
Okay.
It took me 5 years to graduate. And I literally cut the other part of my life off. The same friends didn't. I really cut off that whole back part of my life. And I just lived. I made new friends, obviously, but it's very different when I don't know how to describe this without sounding like a total jerk, but when you're the chubby girl in the group, it's a very different life. You know what I
Yep.
mean? All of a sudden, I really like fashion and beauty and those things. And all of a sudden, Olivia had to take me to like, back in the day, there was no cute plus size clothes. She took me to like Macy's and I was like, we're shopping in the section where mom gets her clothes,
Yeah.
and it
Yep.
was just, it was hard.
Yeah. Were you, when you graduated college, did you immediately get a job? And were you just sort of mired in
So
that and doing that all the time?
I did. So I graduated college and I went to college. I did PR and marketing and then I minored in speech therapy. So it helped me later on in life being a speaker, but I never knew back then. I just minored in it because I don't know, I minored in it because it was a good
Yeah.
thing to go with PR, you know. I originally wanted to be in broadcast news, but because of the way I looked, my advisor said, I think you need to switch.
Wow.
So that was my first time being like, do you call it fat shaming anymore? I don't know. That was the first time being
Yep.
like, oh, I can't, you just loved the way I was before. And then I come back. And so anyway, she was honest with me. And so I changed my major to PR and came home. Well, no, I actually moved to Nashville. That's when I moved to Nashville.
Okay.
At the time, my sister and her husband lived here. And I got a job actually in country music. It was actually an internship, and I waited tables at night. So the country music star, his name's Trace Atkins. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's the tall guy with the ponytail.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but I literally went down Music Row, which is a street in Nashville where all the record labels are, and I knocked on the doors and old fashioned handed out resumes.
Yeah.
And this woman was like, "You have a college degree?" I was like, "Yes." And she was like, "We'll hire you for free." And I was like, "Okay." So I took a job and, did PR and did the grunt work, the coffee and I remember having to iron his shirts when he was just stuff in the office that you do when you're like the grunt person, brush his ponytail. I don't know.
Back up. So you're working for Trace Adkins at this point.
Right.
Okay. And I've been to Nashville many times, as you know.
Yeah.
So, and a country music
he's
fan.
PR firm. So I worked for the PR firm that represented him. And they were like,
Very cool.
Back then he was their biggest client for sure.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Outside of work, were you going home and just sort of still hiding away from everybody, or are you developing your own friend base at this point?
Well, I had my friends in Nashville, kind of, but at that point, when I got out of college, I lived with Ben and Olivia for about a year. At that time, Olivia was singing all over the country, so her husband was the one that was telling me how to get everywhere. And Ben and I are really close. He's kind of like a brother. Well, he is a brother to me. And so, and then I met people waiting tables at night. And it was the first place that I had lived where nobody knew me before this all happened. And so, I was like the chubby, funny, person, So dating was obviously not on the table at that point. Like I was like, if anyone thinks I'm ever gonna, I don't know. It was just, that was hard. It was always kind of a joke that I was single. It was always like this big joke, I guess, and that I perpetuated that. And I had some friends from college that I stayed in touch with, but I really made new friends. Like I kind of created a new, I guess, life for myself at that point.
Yeah. I know that we're probably pretty good at the self-deprecating humor. I know you're very funny. So you were probably just crushing that all day.
Oh, I mean, it was, I just remember thinking to myself, if people think you're funny, then it's cool to be, it's okay to be overweight. It's okay. Yeah. And at that point I was perpetually gaining. Like I was getting bigger and bigger at that point. I was always fad dieting. I remember Olivia and I, we came to this like clinic and got these diet pills. I mean, the creepiest place, this older man, it was the creepiest situation. And we paid $40. They weighed us, took our blood pressure, and they gave us like speed, basically. I remember taking it the first day and had like a tremor, like my hand was like, So I was always trying to lose weight. I was always wanting to be thin. It was always a dream to be thin. And at that point, it was more about, I want to be able to wear my bikini. It wasn't even about health. At that point, I didn't really care about my health. And the self-hatred really started during that time.
That was going to be my next question.
Was tough.
Just from a mental health perspective, you can hide it through the humor and through all the other things. You're keeping yourself busy, but internally you are wrecked.
I was wrecked. I was super depressed. I also had this idea, and I know a lot of people that don't have weight problems can relate to this. I was going to get out of college. I was going to get this amazing job. I worked so hard in college. I worked 2 jobs. I did all these internships. I was in all the clubs. I did all this stuff. I wasn't in a sorority. I did all the things to excel in a career. And then I got a job for free and I waited tables at a brewery at night. Right. So I did that for 2.5 years probably. And, it doesn't seem like a very long time, but back then it felt like forever. You're making no money. Right. And Nashville wasn't as glamorous back then as it is now. Well, not that it's glamorous, but people think it is. And so, it was a tough time. It was a tough, and also I was working at this PR firm and they were going to all these parties and all this. And I was the one answering the phones and and I always I felt like it was like the Devil Wears Prada. I was always thinking, oh, they're going to invite me to, and no, it was always just like Cinderella can stay home. And
I was getting ready to say this.
Brush the ponytail. Like it was, and the person that I worked for was literally like that. She was I can't even explain, the diva among diva. Like, and she was an older person, and yeah, it was I could
Rough.
just during that time, like thinking about it now, it was very weird and interesting, and yeah, it was like two separate lives. I was in the music industry during the day. I was the waiting tables industry at night.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people in that wait tables, they drink heavily. There was a lot of more drinking, and even though there was drinking in college, after college, there was a lot of that, and so I wasn't so much interested in that as I was just making a new community, like a new friends.
Yeah.
But they just weren't really I'm kind of a perpetual, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a total weirdo, but I'm a perpetual good girl, kind of. Like,
Yep.
I never really got into drugs. I never really, I mean, I drank a little bit in college, I guess, but I never really went, thank God, because I was already so depressed because of my weight,
Yep.
you know, to add alcohol and pills or whatever on
That
top
would have
of
been
that.
bad. Well, I want
And
to
it was the
ask
first time I was really exposed to people doing cocaine, people doing drug, like that whole
Yep.
industry. And it
Could have been worse.
Yeah, could have been way worse. For
Yeah.
sure.
So I want to ask a question for a follow-up question later.
Yeah.
You mentioned sort of the dating being off the table during this portion of
Mhm.
your life. Previous to the accident, your freshman year, or even late in high school, I would assume that you had a lot of attention and those types of things were happening. Accurate?
I did.
Okay.
So this is so embarrassing. I dated the quarterback of the football team for
Hey.
3 years. We dated a long time. And I went to every prom, freshman, sophomore, and I think it was more because, not because I was like stunningly beautiful or anything. I think it was more because I was really outgoing and I really was friends with everyone.
Yeah.
And so looking back now, it was really because of I was me, and I just never tried to be someone, I just never really
Yep.
tried to. He was a wonderful guy. He was a great guy. We broke up my freshman year of high school. So we dated, my freshman year of college.
Yep.
Right before the accident, actually. Cause I was, seeing what else is out there. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to take someone from home. Like, I
Yeah.
can take
Yeah.
someone on the baseball team. Like, I can, so yeah.
Wow.
But wonderful guy and great dating experience, obviously. I mean, I dated more before him, but he was my longest, like long-term, I guess you could say, at that point.
Got it. So
There was no dating in college. Like, there
no,
was.
okay. Yeah, that's and I want to eventually get to
Yeah.
after the Biggest Loser stuff, but and I've read a lot about this. Olivia was really the one that called you and said, hey, they are doing this next season and it's a team, like a couple, and you were like, I read the word aghast in an article.
I was. You have to imagine someone coming up to you being like, you'd be perfect for The Biggest Loser. Like,
Yeah.
you would be, I had never seen the show. I just knew it was really obese people running on treadmills, eating like lettuce and getting yelled at. And kind of how it happened is her and Ben lived in New York at the time. They went to Chicago for an audition. The two of them didn't tell any of us. And they basically told Ben he wasn't fat enough. That's what they say, right?
Wow. Okay.
And they were like, do you know anyone? They liked Olivia's story. She was an opera singer. They went, do you know anyone else? And she was like, yes, but she'll never do it. So she basically called me and said, Ben and I are in Chicago, which was so weird because back then we didn't have, I don't think we had Skype or anything, but we talked every day. Olivia and I are super close. And I didn't know they were going to Chicago. They made this thing like it was an early anniversary thing and all this. And I was just
You
like,
would have
okay.
known that.
Yeah. And they were like, and we'd love to fly you out to come see us. And back then they didn't have any money. And I was like, oh, Ben's going to lay down a couple $100 for me to fly to Chicago. It was this weird. So I really kind of got tricked into going. Like, I didn't really know. And, I was like, great, for the weekend, I don't have to pay for it. And so I got there and she basically told me what was happening. And we were going into a third interview at the time for them to meet me.
Oh my God.
Right. And so we pull up to this hotel. I'll never forget. It was the Intercontinental Hotel in Chicago. And there was a line of people wrapped around the entire hotel. Like back then, you have to understand, this is like Biggest Loser heyday, right? And they all had like signs, Jillian and Bob signs about previous contestants. It was, and I remember looking at all these people and just being like, what is this? This is like a chubby convention. Like, I just remember thinking, what is, and we walk in and that's when Olivia was like, well, this is what we're doing, and I was just kind of, and so we went, I remember I was like, well, you're going to buy me a new outfit because I'm not going. And, so we went shopping and bought matching outfits. First time since like, second grade or whatever.
Right.
And we walk into this interview. It's in a hotel room, which I thought was so creepy at the time. I was like, I'm going to this. I had no idea what to expect. Had never watched the show. Knew a little bit about it just because, you flip through and you see
Yep.
things, but did not want to do it. And so I just was like, I'll just bomb this and we'll go leave and go eat pizza. That's why I came
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's deep dish.
Yeah. Right. And we did.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah, it
crazy.
was and the thing about The Biggest Loser, let me just tell you, in the interview process, people are clamoring to get on the show. I can't tell you, people, I was looking around like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to. First of all, I was still in this major hiding phase of my life, right? The thought of going on TV, and I never thought I would actually make it, honestly. The thought of and everyone seeing you, like, I was like, oh, like, and
Yeah.
Olivia knew that about me because it was always a joke. Like, Hannah sees someone at the mall and she ducks into the bushes, which always happened. If I saw anyone I
Wow.
knew from any time in my life, I was always like, no. So
So
it
let's
was a
go
big
on
step for me
TV.
just to walk in. Yeah. And Olivia was basically like, if you ruin this for me, like
Wow.
I need this and you need this more than me. And Olivia and I are really close, but Olivia has always been the person in my life that has helped me do hard things, you know, especially after the accident and all those things. Like, she was always pushing me and I was always pushing her. We kind of have like a twin thing, even though we're not twins, but we're
Yep.
really able to push each other in difficult situations, you know? And so it was more of the, let me grab you by the collar and be like, don't screw this up, you know? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm about to screw this up. Like,
It's
yeah,
coming.
right.
Wow. And then, I don't want to go into the full process, but it was
No,
like a
sure.
4 month process of
Hmm.
interviews and psych evaluations
Oh,
and
yeah.
just like crazy stuff is what I was reading about.
It was a lot. We had the interview. The only thing that kind of got me past that interview is the guy that was interviewing us, who's now one of my great friends, was like the hottest guy I'd ever seen. He was just like, it was like literally we walk into this hotel room, which was already creepy. There are all these cameras everywhere. So I'm like, what is this? Like, you know, and he walks in, and in my mind, it was like, you know, his hair was blowing in the wind. He had like a rose in his mouth. Like, it was this
Right.
whole scene of, oh my gosh, this guy's from LA. He was very good looking, still is. He's a great guy. And he basically Oprah'd us. He was like, you know, obviously you're funny because you hate yourself and all that stuff. And
Yep.
I was like, you don't know me. And they loved it because I guess they liked it because Olivia and I were the same but different. But I was like, no one on the show can understand the way I feel. Like, no trainer, no, like, I don't, you
Right.
know,
Well, they want the
and
person that doesn't want to be there because that's the person that
right,
probably should be there, right?
right. And he
That's
basically
crazy.
said to me, out of everyone I've talked to today, which was thousands of people, you probably need to be here the most. He's like, you're obviously the
Wow.
most depressed. You're the most this and that. And I mean, it was at the time they did say they thought we were small as far as together, because a lot of people had a guy on their team or someone that was over like 400 or something like that. And so I remember Olivia saying to me, well, we just need to stop our diets. Like, cause we were always trying to diet. We were always trying to like, but we
Yeah.
were still, in my opinion, I mean, you weigh 250 and you're, you know, and the way our body fat percentage was, we were still really heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a 3 or 4 month process. Interviews, we had to, and then we got to go to the finals in Los Angeles. And the only reason why, and they kept telling Olivia and I that we probably weren't going to make it. We were more like alternates, kind of.
Okay.
They thought we were funny and we had weird accents and we were kind of this kooky group. We finished each other's sentences and they thought we were weird. Some of the stuff they said to us, looking back, I'm like, they were not nice, you know. And it's so funny because the people that interviewed us ended up being our biggest supporters and like our good friends still to this day. And so, also an awkward conversation going and telling your boss that you're going to
Yes.
finals week for a TV show
Yeah.
called, you know, and what TV show they ask, and you're like,
The biggest. Yeah.
where all the fat people go. That part was humbling to say, you know. And then I kept
Yeah.
thinking to myself, back then Facebook was so big, right? Like,
Right.
Facebook is how you always posted your pictures from here up, you know, and all that.
Yep.
And I was like, I just kept thinking, well, they keep saying that we're not going to make it. So there's no way that anybody will have to. So I didn't really tell a lot of people, because when you
Yep.
go off to Los Angeles to the finals, you don't know if you're going to go on the show or not. You're either going to go and be gone or you're going to come home.
Oh,
So you
wow.
don't
Okay.
know.
Got it.
So like
So
you're
it's not
packing for
like an
something.
interview that you're gonna have to,
Mm-mm.
come back
No,
and then do it again. Wow.
no. So by the time you get to finals, and see, we didn't know this because Olivia and I might have been the only couple in our season that didn't try out before. Several people tried out for multiple seasons, and knew so much about the show. Olivia and I were very naive. Like, we didn't know about people like water loading for the first weigh-in. Like, we just didn't know anything. Like,
Wow.
we were working out in our rooms trying to get ready when really we should have been like, I don't know, eating cornbread. I don't know.
Yeah, pounding
So it
donuts.
just shows that you don't have to have like going into something like this, like strategy. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes it probably makes it better just to be yourself. And
That's the
yeah,
thing. And
wow,
honestly, I mean, we'll get into this, but you're so exhausted. In my opinion, that's all you can be.
yeah,
But it was really cool because you saw they kept us quarantined for like 12 or 13 days. You couldn't leave your room, but you're in like a really nice hotel. So we were at the Westlake Village, like this really nice hotel, Four Seasons, which is awesome. I don't know if they have that kind of budget today, but it was nice.
yeah.
And I remember we saw Marcy and Courtney in the gym. We saw
Okay.
them. We didn't really get to talk to them, but we saw them. And it was the first time I saw Courtney ever. I didn't know who she was. And this was before we even started. She was running on the treadmill like a bat out of hell. Like I remember looking at her and being like, and Olivia was like, we can do that. And I was like,
No.
I've not been on a treadmill or into a gym.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
But why was she doing that?
so they let certain people down to the gym for like timing, and they accidentally let us down at the same time. So the only people that I saw before we actually got on the show was Marcy and Courtney, and we saw Arthur.
Okay.
And Arthur looked at Olivia and I and was like, you two aren't trying out for the show, are you? So already people were like haggling us, like,
yeah,
because we were two girls and
sizing up the competition.
Right. And so, and at that point I was like, oh my gosh, people really want to do this. Like, why would you want to go on like, why? But I wanted to go to LA. I thought we were going to get to go do all this fun stuff. We were stuck in a hotel room the whole time.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget that moment when I saw Courtney. And this is like a girl that weighs significantly amount more than me, running at a 10.0, which is really fast.
Yeah.
And just completely focused. And I just kept thinking to myself, we have to go against her. Like we're screwed. Like,
yeah.
You know, and she was always the kindest, nicest, and
She's
became,
great.
as you know, her and Marcy are like our family.
Yeah.
Arthur is too. I mean, everybody really is, but her and Marcy especially. But watching people come in prepared.
Yep.
Because they knew what they were getting into, and us just being 100% not.
Yeah.
Olivia was like, oh God, maybe we should try to work out. We tried, but I was just like, this is.
Yeah. And then obviously the reality sets in. You get on the show, you are accepted. And then, those of us that have watched the show, it's insanity. I mean, it's just straight up, you're no phones, no internet, nothing. You are focused on your mental health, eating right, exercising like crazy. What were the first 3 or 4 days like for you?
So the very first day, they basically, first of all, when they told us we were on the show was like that morning, and we're all in a room, and they start, Allison Sweeney comes in, and I knew she was the only one I knew who she was because I watched soap operas. So I was like, oh my God, Sammy's here. I was like, Olivia, oh my God. And they were calling out, and it was kind of sad for the people that didn't make it. They were calling out the teams.
Yep.
And Olivia and I were towards the end, and they had already told us, and I don't know why they told us this, like looking back, because everyone thought Olivia and I were going to be at the bottom all the time. Like we were very not competitors. Like no one thought we would ever. I mean, this was like we were at the very bottom, and so they called our names, and I wasn't even paying attention because I thought they already told us that we're not going to make it. And Olivia was like, "Come on, that's us!" And they're like, "You're the purple team," and they gave us these purple shirts that looked like. It's like an Easter peep kind of purple color. Like everyone called us the peeps because we look like, And then I looked at Olivia being like, oh my God, like what? And the part of me, and people get mad when I say this in interviews, a part of me was really upset because I didn't want to do it. I still, to that time, like I was just, and then I just kept thinking, oh my God, people are going to see me. And I was having so much anxiety. So then they took us to the ranch. We did the promos, which is just us walking in, looking like larger than life, obviously. And they took us to this waiting area. TV is a lot of waiting and stuff. And they fed us like Mexican food, which is so funny, like Mexican to-go food, right?
Nice. Yeah.
We hadn't, which, everyone's just like chowing because we don't know what's happening. Like we don't know we're about to get on a treadmill. We had no idea. And I remember they were talking to us, and it was the most nervous I'd ever been, just because back then, I didn't like surprises. Like I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. At that point, I had just called my boss and been like, I'm not coming back. Yep. I was thinking, how am I going to pay my bills? But on my phone, like I was not prepared. Everyone else came prepared. I was completely, because I didn't think we were going to make it. And actually, the cameras weren't on yet, but right before we went to the challenge, I fainted for the first time in my life. My knees buckled and I passed out, which everyone says worked for me because everyone was like, oh my gosh, the weakling. So I completely passed out. my knees would just went underneath me. They gave me this. Part of it was because, well, the Mexican food and the nerves, and they gave us what we were going to wear. And I found out we were wearing these like hot pants. Like I found out the wardrobe situation. And I really panicked. And the most unsupportive, and any females that watch this, you will understand. When you're a heavier girl, you need a supportive bra. You need the strap. You need like, no. And I looked at Olivia and I was like, I'm going to have to wear this in front of. And then they said to us, we want to let you know that Biggest Loser is the most popular show on NBC. 97 million people will be watching you.
Great.
And five minutes later, I was out cold. And then they took us for the first weigh-in. That was the first weigh-in. So if you watch the first episode, I look kind of like this. I'm just like, so everybody's sweating. And first of all, the gym is a set. There's no air conditioning, no heat or anything. The walls move. There's no toilet. There's no running water. There's a porta potty outside. Everyone thinks it's like this glam.
Wow. Yeah, you think it's like a gym.
You have all these really large people, and it was like 100 degrees, and you're filming for hours. First day of filming, you don't know anything. I've never done TV before, and you're having to weigh. Then they told me that we had to take our shirts off, and that's when I really started panicking because I didn't know that because I, like an idiot, didn't go back and watch anything, you know. And so I didn't know we were gonna have to. I knew we were gonna have to weigh, but I didn't know we were gonna have to weigh in hot pants and like these unsupported bras and these like slipper things. Like that was mortifying. And I kept thinking like, oh my God, my boss is going to see this. Like all these people.
Yeah. Wow.
That was, yeah. So for me, it was so much more than just getting on TV. It was like I was mortified, you know? And then we went to the first challenge and I couldn't even hardly do it because I was so, you know. So Olivia did most of the first challenge. They didn't really show that, but I stepped in a few times because they had given me like a shot and I had this weird headache from passing out and they were concerned my blood pressure was like up and down. And so she did most of the first challenge. I did some of it, but I was not feeling, you know, I was throwing up. I was a nightmare. And Olivia was like, this was the perfect because everyone thought we were like the worst. And we were, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, we came in 6th place, which the first top 6 got to pick their trainers. And so we barely, you know.
But you were sandbagging the whole time. You were just like, yeah, I'm sick. I can't do this. And then you just dominated the whole season.
You know, that day was the only day that I probably sandbagged. But I think that day I also felt like after that, I was like, I have something to prove here. Like one thing about me, and you know this because you kind of know me now, I'm extremely competitive with myself. Like to my own fault, I am such a competitive person. And so I just kept thinking they're looking at, and I didn't know everyone at that point. Like we didn't know each other. They're looking at me like I'm like this poor. And also I was sad because Olivia and I are together. We are very competitive, but she is too. So the next day I was like, I'm not going to let her drag me through this because I'm strong and this and that. I just didn't feel. Next days we met Bob and Jillian, who I didn't know. And I was totally in love with Bob. He was like the most beautiful man I'd ever seen besides the other guy. He like walked in and I was like, oh, I had no idea he was gay. Like him and I laugh about this all the time. Could care less about Jillian. Everyone was so gaga over her. And I could, like, when she walked in, I was like, she has nothing in common with me. I will never look like that.
Yeah.
Her muscles were popping. And she's actually in person very beautiful. She looks very beautiful. And so I think I wasn't prepared for the way they looked walking in. You know, it was that same double doors bust open, the sun shining on them. They're just beautiful people.
Doves.
They're wearing like, you know, Louis Vuitton leggings, just the whole Hollywood thing.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
And that was the second day. So it was, you know, now you're starting to kind of get to know people a little bit. I liked mostly everyone, you know.
It's
and
people.
everyone
You're going to struggle with someone. Yeah.
Right. And there was media there. And so everyone wanted to talk to Rulon because he was the former Olympian.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, didn't really understand that. And it kind of brought me back to, oh, he was a real Olympian. Like he got to like do all these things, you know?
Yep.
And then they were like, well, he's almost died like 4 times. And I was like, oh, well, there goes my story. Like, you know? And so the first week was just me feeling weak. Honestly, it was just me feeling like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. Like,
yeah.
How am I going to do this? And then it was about not going home that first week because everyone in the house was always trying to run numbers and writing things down. Everyone put Olivia at the bottom every week. Everyone was like living Hannah until we started getting in better shape and started, you know, kicking ass. Might I say?
When you, I know that the first weigh-in after you got there, you had lost 16 pounds.
Hmm.
Was there a moment that you're like, holy crap, I can do this? Was that a big moment for you?
So it should have been, but everyone else lost so much more than us. I mean, first of all, let me just say this. That very first week was, because of the way the filming was in the first week, it was almost 12 days. So it was almost 2 weeks. So everyone's
Yep.
always like, it's 6 days and you lose. But because we didn't water load, like Ruan, I mean, you're talking about a man that knows, and this is not his fault. He knows how to manipulate his weight. He's a wrestler, an
Yep.
Olympic wrestler. So he had loaded 30 pounds. I mean, people were losing, 16 was low. It was like
Yeah.
it wasn't the lowest, but it was low. And Olivia and I lost the same. For the
Yep.
first 3 weeks, we lost the exact same amount. And so, but for me, I had never lost more than 2 pounds in a week. Like for me, it was incredible. Like it was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. But in that first month, you were comparing yourself to everyone else. Like I didn't
Yep.
have the tools yet to not do that, Um,
So
and I
what?
had this chip on my shoulder from the first day of looking so weak. I was
Yeah,
like,
I
oh my
bet.
gosh, like they don't know that I used to be like whatever, and you're just honestly trying to survive. You're so tired. Your body is just getting, but my competitiveness was out like right away. Like Olivia and I, we sun up to sundown. See, we had these back then, we wore the computers on our arms to show they didn't have like Fitbits and all the stuff that they have now.
Sure. Yep.
So we had to hit certain calorie burns, like Jillian would give us each, and so Olivia, it took us till midnight, Olivia and I we had slower metabolisms, we had PCOS, we had hormone issues. We were older. There were like 18-year-olds there, right?
Yep.
And so we did have to really work. I mean, really, really hard. But also our PCOS, we got ourselves in that situation too. So it's the chicken and the egg thing, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so I was starting to understand I did this to myself. Like I was starting to understand that at some point I've got to take responsibility for what has happened and can't blame it on falling down a flight of stairs and all this kind of stuff.
How
So
much
it's a
of
lot.
I know a lot of it was obviously the physical weight loss,
Mhm.
but you talked so much earlier about the mental health and depression and those types of things. Was part of it attacking that as well?
For me, that was the number one thing.
Okay.
I was in such a terrible place at that point in my life. I was successful. At that point, I wasn't I was working in a career. I was in healthcare. I had bought my own home. I was a successful person on paper. Um, but I was in major, at that point, hiding had gotten even worse. Like I was basically in my house all the time. I'm a very outgoing person,
Yep.
but the hermit part really kind of started happening. And I really had to work on that. And I didn't want to talk about it. Like I would rather, at that point, it was nice when they would pull you because you could get off the treadmill or you could take a break from working out. So everyone was always like me, me, me.
Yep.
But for me, it got to a point where I was in such good shape towards the middle and the end that I didn't want to do that anymore. Like I didn't want to talk about those things. And in the beginning, Jillian and I don't remember, I haven't gone back and watched honestly, but I've tried to watch certain things, but it's very weird watching yourself on television. And I said a lot of things that I'm like, what were you thinking saying that on television? I said a lot of, the amount of times I said the word balls, I don't know. It's, yeah, I really said some interesting, but you're yourself, you're exhausted. Like some people weren't really themselves. Like when I watch clips back, I'm like, that person is so funny. Like I can't believe, but I was so tired. Like nowadays, I don't know if you're watching this season, like they're wearing earrings and makeup and I just looked like a hag the whole time. Like, I could hardly even get my hair washed. I couldn't even lift my arms to wash my hair. Right.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting the way it's changed. But the mental part of this is, in my opinion, for me personally, is 100 times harder than the physical. The physical is grueling. I mean, you're talking about, however, understand, and this goes into another topic, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about, but we only saw Bob and Jillian 2 or 3 days a week. 3 days was a bonus. And it was for 3 hours and you're sharing them with 20 people or 22 people. Right.
Yep.
So everyone thinks that they're holding your hand. They're with you. There is 20 more hours in the day where you're on your own. Yep. And you are an adult. You can work out as much as you want. You can eat as much as you want, eat as less as you want. No one chained us to the gym. No, I want to be clear about this. Yep. Nobody made us do anything. We could leave at any time. If you wanted to leave and go home, you could leave and go home. Right? Nobody forced you to do anything. It was the first time, though, that I looked around and I was like, okay, I have all this support. This is really hard. And I started really falling in love with the contestants, Irene, Courtney, Jen, you know, the women of this season really came together early on. And we were also separated from the other team. Like they were separated, from us. And we worked really hard to get Bob and Jillian. So we chose not to have immunity, which is, everyone thought we were dumb in the beginning because we chose 4 weeks.
Yep.
And I remember Jillian looking at me and going, especially you two. Why would you two? It was like this whole thing, you two are like, and so, but at the same time, Olivia and I got to a point where we were like, we can do this. Like this is really hard. And this day in and day out, it's hard. You're talking about Groundhog Day. You're doing the same thing every single day. You're waking up, You're pushing your body to the limits. You're eating 100% clean. And you have to understand our season is one of the longest, I think it is the longest running season in Biggest Loser history. So 21 weeks.
Yep.
So you're talking about not having we did have a high calorie day on once a week, but you're talking about having you could have whole grain cereal or a piece of cheese on your egg whites. You're talking about so it was really, I can't even explain it. It was really hard, but it was one of the best 21 weeks of my whole life. I mean, it was, you just have the chance to work on yourself, even though it was grueling and people wanted to go home so bad. But for me, there was nothing really waiting for me at home, I felt like. So for me, I got to the place where I loved being there. It was hard. And there were days where I didn't want to do it, obviously. But you also get to a place where it becomes your life and you love being there.
Yeah, I really want to get to sort of life after that. But was there a moment in the show during those 21 weeks that the light really clicked on for you and you're like, I'm going to win this. I'm going to be number one?
Well, as far as winning, that wasn't early. But I remember Jillian and I having a conversation. And this was so many conversations that her and I had that were so important were off camera, So let me preface this by telling you, Jillian and I did not get along in the beginning. I didn't like her. She didn't understand. I didn't respect her or trust her because I felt like, she knows nothing about me. She'll never look like, So she never even called me by my name. She called me Michelle for the first 3 weeks. Olivia was always like, Michelle, that's you. And I was like, So we had this conversation and she said, I want to tell you something. And everyone else was at lunch and she pulled me behind, which happened often. She said, I want to tell you something. The whole cast and crew, we always bet on who's going to win, who's going to make the Final Four. We all, after watching the first week, and she said, I want to let you know you're nowhere near. You are, Olivia, really, but especially you're nowhere near the top of the heap.
Wow.
She said, but I know that there is something in you that has to come out while you're here. And if you don't focus on what's happening internally, she was like, you are 100% in denial of your life. You are 100% depressed. Probably need to be medicated. She would always tell me that I need to be medicated.
Nice.
She was like, you hate yourself so much that a lot of people that are in this situation don't let themselves not just win, but succeed, And at that moment, I finally realized maybe she does care about what happens to me. Maybe.
Yep.
And she was like, and the second you figure out how strong you are, she was like, no one will catch you. And so we really had this moment of, I felt like I was always trying to catch up with the herd. I was the back but really I was just had my head down. I was doing the work. And she was like, keep doing what you're doing.
Uh-oh.
I was like, okay, we're going to keep doing this. And another point that happened is we were standing at the sink. There was a bunch of us. We had just eaten lunch. We were all doing dishes and stuff. And Moses, who was on a different team, the nicest man, still one of my dear friends, he was doing a weekly check-in of all the numbers. If so-and-so loses this much, if so-and-so, and he had a list of the people, who's at the top, who's this. And he said to me, I'm sorry, you're at the bottom. We put you at the bottom. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, I mean, strength wise and how much weight you've already lost. And, you're never really at the top, And I remember going upstairs and I was pissed. I was like, it was time to go to bed. It was like 2:00 in the morning. We had just had an elimination. I remember walking in like and to be honest, my side of the room was a mess. Olivia's side was completely neat. I was throwing stuff and I was just like, this is I was so upset. And Olivia was like, the beauty of this is we're not a threat to anyone. Nobody thinks. And she basically said, we're here for a reason. We feel like the Lord put us here, which we did. We're spiritual people. And she was like, the only person that we have to impress is ourselves. She just kind of looked at me and we were both crying. Both of us were like really upset. She was like one person above me on the list. Basically, I was the last one. And she was like, we're here for a reason. God opened this opportunity for us. And it wasn't about being famous because we knew nothing about that. It was about getting the weight off and being able to feel better so you can have a better life. It was for us, it was so much more about having a better life.
Yep.
We already knew we couldn't have kids, both of us. They already told us that. We had already been through all the medical testing. We were actually eating different things than everyone else because of our hormones. Jillian had Olivia and I on this other thing. And she basically said, it doesn't matter. We have to fight to stay here for ourselves. They don't matter.
Yep.
What Moses says about you doesn't matter. And that was the first time that I was like, I got to stop comparing myself to what's happening because nobody knows me and I don't know what they're going through. Moses could have been going through something terrible. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so that conversation with Jillian, 2 days later, that thing with Moses, Olivia and I, after that, it was like, I hate to say, turn the corner. That's such a biggest loser term. But the light just kind of went off and I was just like, I have to figure out how to give more. I have to figure out how to do more. I have to figure out how to. And so Olivia and I, we just turned this. It was kind of mid-season, I guess, maybe a little bit before mid-season. And it was like no holds barred. Like I was
That's
just
awesome.
like, and I still, maybe more than Olivia, but we had relationships in the house, right? Like it wasn't a strategy, but it was like high school. Like I was friends with everybody. I liked everyone, maybe besides one person. But at that point I was like, I'm just as capable as all these other people. I am just as smart. I am just as nice. I am, it was the why not me thing. Like that really hit me hard.
That's awesome.
Why? Because I fainted the first day. That was weeks ago. Like,
yeah.
And from that moment on, Olivia and I were always hidden, kind of. We were never at the top. We were never at the bottom. We were kind of somewhere in the middle,
Yep.
And I truly feel like that's just where we were. And then it was like all of a sudden we just kind of broke away from the pack, which was
very cool.
Pretty awesome.
So there's a million questions. I mean, I could do a whole nother 2-hour show. Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Oh, no.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Uh-oh. Hold on.
Let me hit audio. Hold on. Are you muted by any chance?
I don't think so.
No. I don't know what's happening. I can see you just fine.
I'm trying. Hold on one second. Okay. Can you hear me now? Audio. Hello? Check.
Should we log off and back on? I don't know. Yes?
Can you hear me now? How about now?
No, I can't hear you.
I don't think we can do that. Okay.
Don't stress. It's okay. Technical difficulties.
Always. Technical difficulties.
You do part 1, part 2. Should I leave and then come back? Okay.
But for some reason, Hannah can't hear me. So luckily, I've got viewers texting me. So hold on 1 second. I would sing a song or something, but
I could hear you just a second, and then once you come on, it's off. I'm unmuted. Let's see.